Okay. We live?
Yeah.
Great. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:32 on June 6, 2024. So welcome, everybody. I see we're in some seriously great summer spirits today. And of course, it's great to see you, Assistant City Manager Audrey Seymour Ramberg. Welcome back. If anyone needs a copy of the agenda, there are some in the back. If you need one of these. Next item, roll call. I will now ask the Principal Management Analyst to take attendance by roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Chadwell is absent. Commissioner Flicko. Here. Commissioner McDonald. Here. Commissioner Smith. Here. Commissioner Webb.
Here.
Vice Chair Sylvester.
Here.
And Chair Nokita is absent. We have a quorum.
Great. Excuse me. For Council Policy K02 on council advisory bodies, I must now propose that the commissioner's absences be defined as excused or unexcused. The commission will then determine by general consensus whether the status of the absence is excused or unexcused per the list of qualified excuses laid out in the council policy. In the absence of general consensus, the commission will take a formal vote. I propose that per the list of qualified excuses defined in the council policy, Commissioner Baird's absence, which is for family leave, will be considered a qualified absence defined as excused. I propose that for the list of qualified excuses defined in council policy, Chair Nokidu's absence for personal reasons is not on the list of qualified excuses and will be defined as unexcused. If the commissioners are in agreement, please raise your hand. That looks unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item 3, minutes approval. The minutes of the May 2nd, 2024 regular meeting have been delivered to commissioner members and posted on the City Hall bulletin board. If there are no corrections or additions, a motion is in order to approve these minutes. Are there any corrections or additions?
So moved, we accept.
I have corrections. Does anyone else have corrections or additions? I'm sorry, you think so?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, you don't think so?
I glanced. I guess I didn't.
5.1 and 5.2 were swapped with storytelling and gender.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
And item 7, I also attended the Multicultural Fest. So now a motion is in order. I think Joan would like to make that motion.
I move we accept the amended minutes.
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. It is unanimous. Oral communications from the public. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the commission on any matter not on the agenda. Each speaker has up to 3 minutes to make their comments. State law prohibits the commission from discussing or acting upon non-agenda items. I see, well, there is nobody in the room and I see nobody on Zoom. Oh, there is.
No comments.
There is a member of the public on Zoom, but without comments. Excuse me. So seeing no comments, I will move on to the next item. Please, oops, sorry. Now that we have Assistant City Manager Audrey Seymour Ramberg here, I would like to motion that we move item 6.1, keeping Mountain View safe and prepared, ahead of our unfinished business items so that visiting staff and outside consultants in attendance can go home sooner. So skipping order to 6.1, the commission will now receive an informational presentation on this item from Assistant City Manager Audrey Seymour. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you for making time for me on your agenda and letting this item move up. I'm really pleased to be presenting on behalf of the city in the efforts that we have been making to study the needs of the city, understand the community's priorities for the city, make sure that we have revenue streams to address those priorities going forward. So moving on to the first slide. Mountain View is really known for being a city that is well managed fiscally and in other ways. I have worked for a number of cities, and lived in Mountain View for many more years than I have worked here, and always saw that reputation of Mountain View as having a very strategic, long-term thinking about the way that resources, revenues needed to be available to resource the provision of services that the community expected and responded to their needs. We've always had a strong commitment to high quality services, and that really is the expectation of our public. And we're committed to maintaining a great quality of life. We do get recognized in other ways for this with high bond ratings and award-winning financial documents, and bring in a balanced budget every year. When we look ahead to the future, however, as with most municipalities, you have a lot of critical infrastructure that needs to be maintained and in some instances improved or even replaced. And in addition to the general upkeep of the city's infrastructure and programs and services, there are new initiatives, whether they're capital or programmatic, that are needed to address the emerging community needs that really will help Mountain View remain a modern and effective city. And in order to meet those needs, an increased revenue investment is required. And just to highlight some of the most significant of the future initiatives that, and I do have slides that I can.
Oh, yeah.
You have a-
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
The most significant of the areas of unmet need relate to our public safety building and our fire stations. And another infrastructure safety related project, but not police and fire, more related to transportation safety, is the railroad grade separations, which are projects identified at both Castro and Ringstorff. Moving to areas that are really quality of, not that kind of moving, quality of life priorities and sustainability priorities are addressing the impacts of climate change and building resiliency into our community and our city services to address the ever more evident impacts of warming climate. And we're lucky to have, thanks to the work of our environmental sustainability task force that really recommended for a chief sustainability and resiliency officer, a position that we did create. And we have a full team that is really not paralleled by any other city in the county, or even the county for that matter, in terms of the scope of things that we can focus on. And we're looking to address the need for carbon neutrality, which the council has adopted a resolution for a 2045 carbon neutrality goal. We're looking at how we can move that up to 2035. And that requires significant efforts around electrification of our transportation and building energy uses in the community, as well as looking at the capacity for the electrical grid to be able to meet those electrification goals. Parks are really important to the quality of life in Mountain View, and we have a target of the number of acres per 1,000 residents that is met well in some neighborhoods of the city, but not met well in other neighborhoods where there is insufficient parkland and park space. And in order to fully achieve that goal across the community, that would require a very significant investment. And then top of many lists is the challenge in our city and regionally around the lack of affordable housing and the need to develop affordable housing. We have a very ambitious number that's been allocated to the city by the Regional Housing Needs Allocation known as RENA. The pipeline of affordable housing projects to meet that would require city investment. That's just the city investment of 50 million. There are other funding sources that are also pulled together to make these affordable housing projects pencil. So moving on to the next slides.
Can we have questions in between, or do you want to?
I'm happy to do it whichever way works best for you. Would you like to ask questions now?
That's every.
Do you-
I would probably prefer to hold them.
Yeah.
At the discretion of the chair.
Because they might get answered along the way.
And Commissioner McDonald, were you able to hear that response?
Now or later.
I will hold them because they may
Okay.
be answered along the way. Thank you, Chair.
So just looking at a couple of the particular unfunded priorities in our public safety arena, we have an administration building that is houses our police department, our fire department administration. It houses the emergency operations center from which all crisis planning and response happens in the event of earthquake or flood or man-made disaster. And also it houses our 911 dispatch center. That building, 45 years old, doesn't mean that it automatically needs to be replaced, but the way that particular building is structured, the masonry block and the roof construction makes it very difficult to modify and improve. And it was designed in an era prior to the current seismic safety regulations, especially for a building of that type, where you do need it to be operational in the event of earthquake. And we've had more recent issues with water intrusion during the big rain events because the dispatch center and the emergency operations center are all basement level. And then we have 5 fire stations, of which 2 are quite outdated. If you've ever been to Station 3, which is where our municipal operations center is, if you've ever been to one of the pancake breakfasts, you've been able to see that station, and it's certain things that have become requirements around and best practices around sleeping sleeping quarters being separated by gender, restrooms being equal and separated by gender, are just a couple of examples of things that need to be updated at our older fire stations. So moving on to the next slide, also wanted to talk a little bit about the traffic safety as another important aspect of community safety. And we have an active transportation plan that is being developed and prioritized in order to really promote people's ability to get around and through the city in something other than a single occupancy vehicle, which accomplishes our sustainability goals as well as the recreational goals, and making our city a really livable city by having safe cyclist and pedestrian routes. The grade crossings I've already talked about. So that has the added benefit of not only improving safety, but also improving traffic flow and addressing congestion issues, and also noise issues, which have become more prominent lately with neighbors around the grade crossings, at grade crossings, where significant alarms are sounded when the trains go through, which as frequently as the trains do go through creates quite an impact for those neighborhoods. And then we have a really robust program in collaboration with our school districts to create and promote and protect safe routes to schools so that school students can get to school safely. So those are some of the needs, and I've given you some price tags associated with those needs. And I do want to acknowledge that, of course, we already do receive revenue from the community through their payment of property taxes and sales taxes. And what is sometimes not realized is that the amount that flows directly to the city of Mountain View is quite small compared to the total amount that is raised. For property taxes, for each $1 that a property owner pays in property taxes, the city receives 16 cents on that dollar. And it's even less for the sales tax revenue. For every dollar spent in sales tax or paid in sales tax, the city receives one penny. So that is why we have been, I think, really forward thinking in the past around looking at the way that we own and lease property. You might know that unlike other cities, there's a lot of property out in the North Bay Shore that's owned by the city that corporations like Google pay lease payments on. And so that becomes a good source of revenue. And it really is something that we do want to continue to look forward to make sure that the revenue streams are going to be sufficient to meet the needs of the community. With our current revenue streams, we are seeing that the economy is more unstable and more uncertain. We fared very well in Mountain View, again, because of some of these less traditional revenue streams during the pandemic and in the tight economic times following the pandemic, where a lot of our neighboring cities saw deficits already and had to make tough budget decisions. The city of Mountain View has stayed in the black and anticipates being in the black this year and next year with the recommended budget that is coming to the city council on June 11th. But as we forecast out into the following 4 years of a 5-year forecast, we are anticipating to be in deficit. Now, I would suggest that we don't need to get too alarmed by those red numbers because any forecast is a best estimate and it's based on a snapshot in time. And there are many things that can happen in terms of expenditure savings or unanticipated revenues. And that even at its largest number in 28-29, $5 million is a lot of money to any one individual or to a small organization, but to a city that has $100 million general fund budget, that is a relatively small percentage. And we would expect that to change with updated forecasts over time. So going to the next slide, when we look at the unfunded needs and times we've had to go to the community for unfunded needs or for revenue shortfalls related to economic conditions, that's been relatively rare. The city has gone out. I think there was one library bond measure where the city was not successful. That was communicated to me by someone in one of the other presentations that I'm making on this topic. But these are the 4 that the city's gone out for voter approval and that have been approved. As far back as 1973, which was when the current property transfer tax was first instituted at a rate of $1.65 per $500 of property sales value, or $3.30 for each $1,000. In 91, there was an increase to the transient occupancy tax, which is also known as the hotel tax. That is paid by usually transferred from the hotel to its guests. And our rate went up from 8% to 10% in 1991. It hasn't changed since then. And most of the other cities in the county have rates in the 12 to 15%. So ours is outdated at this point. In 2010, there was a modernization of the utility user tax, which maintained the current rate of 3%. And then most recently, in 2018, the business license tax was restructured to be increased from a very nominal flat fee to a per employee tax. At that same time, there was a cannabis business tax that was passed, and it did not wind up being a significant source of revenue for Mountain View because the ordinance regulating cannabis sales in Mountain View restricts the sales to be just dispensary only for distribution and not retail sales. We don't have any retail cannabis shops in Mountain View. And there's limitations on the number of such franchises or licenses and the locations vis-a-vis schools or other sensitive uses. So moving on to the next slide. It's always a good question to ask if you looked at what we can do to raise revenues. Are we also looking at how we can control costs? And what this slide shows over the past 23 years is how the headcount or the number of employees that the city hires and employs, how that has changed from 651 back in 2001 to 688 in the current budget year, which is a 5.7% increase over the 23-year period. And that compares to the population growth over that same period, which was almost 22.5%. And that's the population growing from 70,000 and almost 71,000 back in 2001 to almost 86,500 in 23-24. Now it's not a one for one, you don't have a straight curve of how you add staff when the population grows. And this is something that the city studies as we look to housing growth, creating an increase in population. We are definitely looking to make sure that our public services are keeping track. So library services, parks, and other things are going to be sufficient to meet the needs of our growing population. Moving on to the next slide. So in order to determine whether the community would support a new revenue measure and what its priorities are, we have done a lot of community engagement following 6 months or as part of 6 months of study. As this was a council priority project in the work plan that they adopted at the beginning of the 2023-24 budget year. We commenced the study 6 months ago, and one of the most important ways that we got community feedback was by hiring a polling firm. And that firm did a survey, a random survey of Mountain View voters, and asked their likelihood of supporting a revenue measure, what their priorities were, and also how they felt the city was doing generally. Was the city on track with its fiscal management, with its general leadership? And we were really pleased to see very high levels of satisfaction, and that was reported to the city council at their meeting on May 14th. The statistically valid surveys are limited in terms of the number that received them. We wanted to make sure that more members of the community could add their voice to the conversation. And so we actually sent a mailer, which you hopefully all received, to every address in Mountain View, or every household in Mountain View, asking for people's feedback on their priorities. And then we're doing this. We're meeting with not every advisory board, but select advisory boards that we think have a particular perspective about the community needs. And meeting also with our development community and our business community. Because as we'll see in the next slides, that there is definitely going to be benefits to and also impacts to developers and the business community based on the type of tax that we are looking to place on the ballot. But before I get to that, what this slide is showing you is the results of the survey, the statistical survey, in terms of the areas of focus in the city that received the highest rating of importance as a service priority. So these are the ratings of 5, 6, and 7, which were up to extremely important. And you can see the top ones here with 80% for maintaining 911 medical and disaster response, fixing potholes, repairing streets and sidewalks, addressing homelessness. And then in the 70s and the high 60s, improving public safety and emergency response and crime prevention, updating public safety facilities, improving pedestrian and bicycle safety, increasing affordable housing support, and supporting local business. Those are the ones in the 60s to the 70s. So I just have, I think, 2 more slides, and then I'll be happy to answer questions. Thank you for holding on to your questions. So what the city is polled people on were 2 different kinds of taxes. One was a property transfer tax. That's a tax that's paid by the seller of a property when property changes hands. As I mentioned before, that is currently set at $3.30 per $1,000 of assessed value. And what we polled on was having an additional tax up to $15 per $1,000 of assessed value. And what you see there is the revenue that had that tax been in place over the past 5 years, because it's not, it's really dependent on the change in ownership of property, there's quite a bit of variability year by year, but on an average across the 5 years, that would have resulted in a $9.5 million revenue to the city. And what you see in that middle row there is that the proposal that was in the survey was that the tax would apply to properties that are valued at more than $5 million. So that would mean it would not include the vast majority of single-family homes, but for any mixed use, multifamily or commercial properties valued at more than 5 million, this tax would be applied. And that's the revenue that would have been realized by the city over the past 5 years. And just to see what does this mean, how many different transactions over that time frame would have qualified for that tax. The next slide provides that information. That residential, it was actually 8. And I don't know if some of those might be not single family. Back in 2020, 21, I don't know if we had a $5 million single family home, but that could be a duplex or some other multifamily sale that transpired in that year. But in total, the residential for the 5 years, there were 8 sales, 8 transactions totaling 46.7 million. So that must be multifamily, or because you couldn't get to that amount of 8 single family homes. I don't think. And then there were 75 commercial transactions totaling 3.3 billion. So that's where the real assessed value is. And then the total that you see there for both types of property. So that concludes the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about the information or the process of considering this revenue measure for the ballot.
Thank you so much for a great presentation. Commissioner questions? Commissioner McDonald?
When I looked at the relative importance of a variety of projects, I noticed that parks was on the bottom of the list. And since most of the city is well parked in terms of acres, I could understand why it would be so low. But I hope the city doesn't take that as gospel, because the parts of the city that are underparked need more parks.
That is a really good point. How you answer that question, I think, depends very much on where you live and also your, what your personal use of parks is, people with young families, people who are more active. And we know that parks are a really important part of the quality of life in Mountain View. And we have a strategic property acquisition reserve that we use to purchase land. I mean, coming by land is difficult, but we're always on the lookout for it. You might be interested to know that there is a item on the consent calendar of next Tuesday's council meeting approving the purchase of a property in Montaloma.
Yes.
To add to the other property that we already purchased in Montaloma, and we continue to look at properties in that area. And there's other things that are in the works too, that I think will be really interesting for the community to see, and it'll show the city's commitment to really continuing to expand the park land available for our community. We know how important it is.
But that's interesting because we moved into Montaloma in 1960. And in 64, there was going to be a major bond issue that would include parks as one thing. And I was on the subcommittee for parks. And initially, we met at least once a month, sometimes twice a month for almost a year, trying to decide what policy and how the money would be spent geographically and so on. And I can vividly remember that the last subcommittee meeting about parks was led by the city person who headed the Parks and Recreation Department. And he was a big tennis player. And I happened to be quite accidentally the only person who lived on the other side of El Camino. The rest of the subcommittee were tennis players who lived on the, I guess it's the south of El Camino, and they were pushing for tennis facilities and all the rest in the big park that was already there. And when it came to the last meeting and the city person was facilitating it, and the committee was voting on various amounts of money to be spent, I looked at the map, that, huge map there, and the facilitator was showing where this money was going to go. And I said, may I take your baton and illustrate how I see this map? There wasn't a cent that was going to be spent on the north part of El Camino. Not one single cent. And I took the baton and I just circled the area where there wasn't going to be any money spent on parks. And I said, you know, I think we need to look a little strategically at this map, because all the people in this area vote. Why would any of them vote if not a cent was going to go to parks in that area? As a result of my saying that, not because I was wonderful and important and all the rest, simply because I was there. And nobody else from that area was there. And we ended up getting 333, and this was in the 60s, so that was a lot of money. $333,000 went for parks in that area, which is San Ramon, San Varone, and a number of pocket parks and so on. And yet, in spite of that, we've had decades of underparked places in Mountain View, and guess where they are? Same place. I really think history sometimes can inform us in a way that might help us in our decision-making. And I don't think this survey serves us very well. I don't know whether we as a body can do much, but I was almost forced to make this comment.
I appreciate that history and that perspective. Thank you.
Commissioner Puckle.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. My question's more regarding the survey and actually tying into Commissioner Joan here. If I remember correctly from the May 14th meeting, the survey is consisted of like a population of like 600 plus people, right? And I'm glad to hear that we're mailing out surveys as well to the greater population. Is there any potential of doing, physical outreach opportunities, whether that's at a community center or even at a park, to do these kinds of assessment, or was that never a plan to conduct this kind of survey for the general public to
Maybe for
expand?
those without addresses?
The way that polling is typically done, is to poll voters, because that's how you determine what will be successful at the ballot box. But it's important to understand the needs of the community as a whole. We're doing outreach now, to different stakeholder groups, but we're not doing community. We've done the community mailer, and we're meeting with individual groups. And we have some limits of what we can do in terms of when we can be active as city staff, and what we say, because of restrictions you may be aware of in terms of using taxpayer money to advocate for electoral results. So we basically have between now and June 25th, when the council will make its final determination as to whether and what measure to place on the ballot. So we're getting as much outreach done as we can in that timeframe between May 14th and.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith.
Quick question, where can I get more information on the railroad grade separation on the Castro and Ranch Lot?
I fairly certain that there will be project pages on both of those on the city's website. I'm wondering if we can follow up and send a specific link to make that easy for you to find.
I mean, are there meetings or discussions still happening, or is it just gonna go forward with it?
We're fairly far along in the process of designing, well, scoping first the need and the goals and objectives of those projects. And, also the design of those projects where, I mean, there are different stages that the Public Works, often refers to things by what percent design they are, and I don't know where each of them is, but they're, the general design concepts have already been approved by council, and then they go to the engineers to develop the full, like, all of the very specific technical specifications that are needed to then be able to bid it for construction. The other track of work that we're on is identifying the funding for the costs of these, which are significant. And costs have gone up as we've been in the design process, just because the cost of construction and materials and labor have all gone up. And the other challenge is that the state with its budget shortfall had made a commitment to many cities, including in the Bay Area, Mountain View, Palo Alto, and Burlingame for their grade separations. They're clawing that back, even though they were already awarded grants. And I think it's something like $20 million that the city was going to receive. I don't know if you've got that number in your head.
I don't have the exact number, but I know who they were.
Yeah. There is, there was a lot of community outreach done as part of deciding on those projects and deciding on those designs. And at this point, it's just a matter of trying to get them funded. Welcome.
Okay, me, yes. Next week.
Of course you can, Commissioner Webb.
I've got a lot going on in my head right now because thank you for bringing this to our attention. Now we know that we're somewhere along the timeline of these projects. It really doesn't tell us the entire timelines of all of these projects. It just seems really, really light. It's like this is fluffy for me. There's not enough data where I've got a list of questions. I can send them over to you. It's almost like it's a teaser. You say, when you're talking about the previous measures, you talked about the transfer tax, and you kind of gave us a little bit of that. I look at numbers all day. I'm like, you did it at this level at 5 million. Then what's it look like at the next level of development? If we do this, if you do consider doing it to people's homes, because I see this is a great transfer of wealth right now in Mountain View. So many people have lived in these homes for decades, and if we're getting a piece of that, what's it look like? Yeah, we may get some, and then add that to the survey, because we're gonna say, hey, if we do this transfer, will you stay in your place, or are you gonna still sell your house? More likely than not, they'll sell their house still. But these are questions that are within these boxes, just in the previous measures. Are there studies done on these that are gonna give us more information? It's just not enough. And I'm not sure, hold on. Then there's questions like about the buildings, we want to redo the building. Are you gonna raise the building and you use the same location? Or are you gonna find a new location? What's the cost of that? How long is that gonna take? Is it a safety issue now? Because you mentioned a part of it where it's flooding, right? So is that a higher priority versus dealing with our unhoused people? And taking care of that $50 million that we're projecting out. I live by, where I live, right by the Crestview Hotel. I hear the banging all the time. and I know what's going on with that project and who's funding all of that. And if this $50 million is, where's it gonna go? Who's gonna benefit from it? How long is it gonna take? You know, these are all these questions that are just not here. I mean, this is great. And thank you, like I said, thank you for bringing this to our awareness. I don't go to all the city council meetings like Councilor Poigon. But I guess I would have to start going to more so I can be involved with more of what's going on here. Because unlike Commissioner McDonald, I pick people over parks. So those homelessness, unhoused people should be a higher priority in dealing with that. And that takes a lot longer to scope out, to get them in there, dealing with all those situations. Where the priorities, thank you, Audrey.
No, I appreciate the curiosity and the need for more detailed data. You're right that I was top line in my remarks, and for most, if not all of those things in the unmet need bubbles, there is a paper trail, if you will, of analysis and research and policy recommendation and action by council that underlies those things. So for the public safety building, for example, this is actually something that the city has been talking about doing for, I don't know, 20 years.
And again, is that a priority? Because it's been 20 years and they're still talking about it. What if we go another 20? I mean, it's those kind of things like,
Yeah.
Is it really a priority? Because we're not taking any action.
Well, there's a number of reasons why certain infrastructure projects, especially the very big and expensive ones, can be put off until the point where it's reached the point where they can't be put off. And also you've seen how much more expensive things become over that time frame. But I can talk with Principal Management Analyst James to try to provide some links to additional information. And I do welcome if you have specific questions for you to share those, and do my best to get good information to you.
One more. And overall, what's our role in this? It's just this general feedback on specifics.
I mean, if you have particular input about what you see as community priorities, I will be communicating that back as part of our return to council on June 25th. And also, we're hoping that you will support the measure.
And that's your QRs on your, is that a way
The
for us to-
QR is how to put it, have input. It's to say, it takes you to the same input opportunity that the mailer had on the tear off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done enough.
Done enough for now. Okay, we can come back to you. I just want to iterate, I've heard two commissioners, Smith and Webb, say that they would like more information on what really goes into the buckets on slide 9. And I would like to iterate that I would love to know more. I mean, I know a lot about the public safety building costs, so I've been following that project for a while, but I'm definitely very curious how the other buckets got built, particularly around climate change, but the rest of them as well. So I think there is a hunger for data among us. So, Commissioner Poigon.
Thank you. My question was actually on slide 4 on the set amounts of the unmet needs. Is that something that fluctuates given each budget cycle in regards to what need to be met? Or is that something that we are predicting if we reach these amounts, we'll be able to complete the projects moving forward?
These are our best estimates of the cost in order to meet the current unmet needs.
Okay. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, I will jump in. I'm at slide 4, the details behind slide 4. Jumping ahead to my actual first question. On slide 9, you talked about other revenue measures that have happened in the past. And you mentioned that our transit occupancy tax, the TOT, is quite low compared to other cities. Are we looking at evaluating the TOT or any other revenue sources in addition or instead of the measure?
That's a great question, and we definitely have been eyeing and thinking about the transit occupancy tax for a while.
Yeah.
Knowing that it is longstanding at that level and is passed by what other cities around us are collecting. It was something that we were poised to do actually as part of a prior council work plan, and actually came to council and considered it and decided not to go forward with it because it was coinciding with the pandemic and the impact to hotels that they were really, suffering from the lack of guests. And so we did in this survey we tested both the transient occupancy tax and a parcel transfer tax or a property transfer tax. And the transient occupancy tax actually polled lower in terms of voter support, which is a little counterintuitive because often it polls well, since the people who are being polled are not necessarily the people who are going to pay the tax. But there might be a greater sympathy for the economic sustainability of our hotel industry. And it bordered around 50%, the support for the TOT, whereas the support for the property transfer tax was above 60% and stayed pretty constant, even with the negative arguments. If you kind of ever been part of one of these surveys before, you know that they test language about a certain measure, and they say, if you heard these arguments that are positive arguments, would that make you more or less likely to support it? If you heard these negative arguments, would that make you more or less likely to support it? And that, the people who do this for a living can then use those responses to try to help you understand what your likelihood of being successful, because you don't really want to take a measure to the voters that's not going to be successful.
A follow-up. How much revenue did the city make last year in the TOT?
I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
I don't have that information.
Yeah, I'm just trying to do the mental calculation if raising it to
And it was
15% would even make a big difference.
Did poll on 15, so you're prescient on that one. I do know that the amount that would raise is less than the 9 million that the.
Okay,
So it was kind of a little bit of a happy surprise for the city to learn
Right.
that what we thought would have been the more supported revenue measure that wouldn't raise as much was not in fact what was supported by the people who took the survey.
actually really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a couple of other different type of questions. When you polled on the questions on on the areas on slide 12, I have heard feedback from a lot of community members and myself have wondered, were these generated by the people doing the polling, or did people say things like, I want my potholes fixed? So did the survey actually say, I want my potholes fixed, I want my roads fixed?
I didn't get the survey, and that's a good question.
There's a box you'd mark, yeah.
Oh, I don't
So
think I
you-
got the survey either.
Yeah, I got the survey. I got it
It
again.
listed the
Yeah,
the
It
things.
listed all
Ah,
of
And
these.
then
as-
did you have the opportunity to put in something other?
No, well, each
Hmm.
one of these were like individual questions that we got, and then you got to
Fill
fill
in.
say like 1 through 7. Or if it's a priority to you, and you would select it that way.
Okay.
So,
So the feedback I've heard and had myself a little bit is the mental gymnastics around what's the difference between fixing potholes, which is a very specific thing, and fixing roads.
Mhm.
And I can understand that fixing roads also includes like bike lanes and making better marking, but I'm just wondering the philosophy behind that, and also what addressing homelessness meant, when there was also a category for affordable housing. which is probably the one way to address homelessness in our city. So addressing homelessness has raised some eyebrows. So I'm just kind of curious the thinking behind this survey, just to understand it a little better and how it generated the outcomes it did. And I think just one last question about the 5 million. I know the idea is to not impact single family homeowners who are selling their houses, but there have been a number of 5 million and up sales in the city starting to occur. So I wondered if the city was considering any kind of measure to say this will not impact single family homeowners or change that number, because we seem to be steadily marching towards that becoming a viable number for a single family house sale in the city.
Yeah, that topic was discussed by the council when the survey results were presented to them on the 14th of May. And the couple different ideas that got raised is whether or not 5 million was the right threshold, or whether it should be indexed in some way so that it could be adjusted. And so council members may, talk about that again when they are deciding on the final ballot measure.
Yeah, I think from a voter's perspective, people are starting to talk, I've been hearing a lot of buzz about, ooh, that house over there sold for 5 million. So people might think, well, ooh, that could be me when I sell my house in 20 years. Just a thought. So thank you. I think that was it for my questions. I want to circle back, Commissioner Webb.
So we talked about the previous revenue measures. Were there any other types of revenue streams that you guys discussed that you didn't present here?
Well, I learned about one in 1964, a bond. About. And I mentioned that in another advisory board that I went and spoke to had a former council member on it and said that there was a failed library bond. So I will need to check to see if there are any others that got placed on the ballot. I don't believe there's any others that passed between 1973 and now. But there may have been others that did not pass or before 1973.
Any other, sorry, any other commissioner questions or comments? Seeing none, I will open the floor to public comment on this item if there are any raised hands. Seeing no raised hands, we will close out this item and thank Audrey very much for her time here tonight and for her information. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all the great questions. And I'll work with Ms. James to get back to you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Have a great evening.
Thank you too.
Chair, if I may, before we move on to the next item,
Of course. We will be now having a 5-minute break. Returning at about 7:35. Are we live? Yes. Well, welcome back. Thank you, everybody, for allowing that quick break. We are returning to item 5, unfinished business. We will start with item, pardon me. 5.1, the Storytelling Project Ad hoc Committee, Storytelling Project Ad hoc Committee will present an oral update, but no action will be taken on this item. I believe Commissioner Smith will be giving us an update.
Yes, it's the same as last time. But we do know that they are actually processing it right now, that the legal committee of Mountain View is reviewing and hopefully will have answers soon. Of being able to start this project or release this to the public. But
At which point we hope for everyone's support and.
yes, and I expect all of you guys to make really great pieces.
Oh, okay, mandatory participation. I
Oh
didn't know
yeah,
that part.
mandatory participation. I signed you up.
Did anyone have any questions or comments about this item?
I'm on question though,
Oh,
And
sorry to hear that.
and commented out.
Okay, well, that's fine. I will open the floor for public comment on this item. Do we have public comment on this item? There seeing no hands raised, I will move on to item 5.2, Climate Change Outreach Ad hoc Committee. The Climate Change Outreach Ad hoc Committee will present an oral update. No action will be taken on this item. I think Commissioner Poicon. I'm sorry, I do not know.
Providing the update, Chair, thank you. I'm in the process of scheduling the meeting with city staff and will be reaching out to commissioners on the ad hoc committee in the next week with availability.
Great.
Exciting.
Any questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, is there anyone online with their hand raised? Seeing none, I will close this item. Moving on to new business, to item 6.2, since we already talked about 6.1. We will get a fiscal year 24-25 work plan update. We will now receive a presentation on this item from Principal Management Analyst James. The commission will be taking action on this item.
Thank you, Chair. I'll provide a verbal update on this item and a review of the materials in the agenda, since we did have a presentation at the last meeting regarding the work plan ideas and brainstorming. As you may recall, the city council required all council advisory bodies to submit an annual work plan for approval. And the council will be reviewing those in the fall of this year. The HRC's work plan is created from ideas proposed by commissioners. Those ideas have been evaluated for their alignment with the HRC's purpose as outlined in its establishing resolution, as well as staff and commission capacity to complete those items within the year. And with an eye toward city council priorities. So at the at the May HRC meeting, commissioners had an opportunity to put forth potential projects for inclusion and consideration for the work plan. 6 projects were shared, and these were an LGBTQ collaboration with Santa Clara County or with a similar organization. There was an idea to revisit the history of housing project that was completed in the fiscal year 21-22 work plan. Incorporate current events and or policy. There was a proposal for civic participation listening sessions to explore and understand barriers to civic participation. There was a concept for an immigrant experience project that would also. There was a request to have an annual multicultural festival or hold an international fair in fiscal year 24-25. And then finally to host a human library, check out a human type of event in which participants would be able to learn from individuals who chose to share their experiences with them in this human library style event. So with those 6 recommendations, I am pleased to share with the commission that quite a number of those have been recommended for fiscal year 24-25 work session. So going through the recommendations first. I am pleased to share with you that the Multicultural Festival starting in 2024 and onward into the fiscal year be an annual event. that the HRC is invited to help participate in the planning as in previous years. So that was certainly recommended for inclusion on the work plan. Additionally, I've recommended that the commission collaborate with the Santa Clara County Office of LGBTQ Affairs to host a community listening forum. The Office of LGBTQ+ Affairs is interested in holding community listening forums in communities throughout their jurisdiction through the end of this calendar year and would love to partner with the HRC to sponsor an event. Additionally, included in the recommended or proposed recommended work plan is partnering with the Mountain View Public Library to host a Check Out a Human event with the Human Library. The library staff who's participated, who've organized these events in the past, would love to work with the HRC to get a combination of volunteers from the Human Library and from the community to help participate in this event and fund it. And then finally, the recommendation includes attending community meetings to solicit input on civic participation to inform recommendations for public outreach and engagement. With the one, not caveat, but slightly different approach here of starting that project after one of the other work plan projects has been completed, just so that we don't have more than 3 ad hoc committees for which we need volunteers at any one point in time. So those are the recommendations. There were 2 projects that weren't recommended for inclusion on the work plan, and that was the Revisit the History of Housing project. The capacity required to complete that project, both from staff, volunteers, and commissioner volunteers, was very high. And it has multiple as yet unidentified partners. It requires a lot of research, and for that reason, it wasn't recommended for inclusion. And then finally, the Immigrant Experience project, because it wasn't well defined, wasn't included for a recommendation, but could be considered for a future work plan with a specific concept so that it could be evaluated and analyzed. What we found in the past is that projects without a very defined scope can take up a lot of time in committee, defining that scope and coming up with ideas and trying to decide what to do. Whereas if there's a specific call to action or a specific framework going into the committee, it makes them work typically move more quickly. So that's why that was not recommended. So with that, we've reviewed the recommended work plan projects, which as a reminder includes the carry forward project of the climate change outreach. And I would love to open this item up to commissioner questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation and the great context for that. Thank you. Commissioner questions or comments?
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Quick one,
okay.
sorry.
okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I definitely I encourage us to move forward with the LGBTQ plus collaboration. I think it's a worthwhile endeavor, especially partnering with the county agency as well with the Office of LGBTQ Affairs and potentially the HRC with the county. I think it's a win-win situation and especially given the needs assessment had not having been done since like 2019, and then also there's and then the recent activity commissioners have done regarding the LGBTQ plus experience. I think it's a worthwhile endeavor, especially as we're talking about a sense of belonging within our community. So yeah, I hope and implore y'all to vote in favor of making that putting that in our work plan.
Other
Commissioner McDonald started to raise her hand.
No, I had.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just,
Adjusting.
actually, I feel the same way. I think that the work plan makes sense. And I think that we need to build on the work that the county's already done. So we don't spin our wheels, and so we really know what's already done and what we can evaluate what needs to be done.
I always have something to say.
Well, then
True.
say it. That's what you're here for,
It's a good point.
right? I mean, if you had something to say and stayed at home, that would be a waste.
I don't Well,
Commissioner Webb.
first and foremost, I'm super excited about the Multicultural Festival being an annual event. I think this will make a difference in our city. The feedback I got from it was not only from the performers, but for the people outside, the people watching, was all positive. Can't wait to see it again. And you don't see this anywhere else. And we can make this bigger and better and improve it every year. To the point where it's on people's calendars from outside the city to come and watch as well. And I just hope that we're able to participate in a way where we can actually make a difference as commissioners. We can bring our expertise from different cultural backgrounds, different perspectives to add value to. Well, happy with that. Super happy with the Human Library event. And first thing I thought of, and I'm not sure if you guys thought about this, was Human Library, we're gonna check out an old person. We can check out different people. That's the cool part about it. But I think, you know, as our committee, we can help tell our neighbors about this so that we can encourage them to be participants as well, so we can get a variety of people to enjoy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm definitely gonna tell my neighbors about it.
The whole point is to bring tons of diversity to.
Yeah, yeah.
Who's got some 7-year-olds?
I got an 8-year-old.
That would be interesting.
Really, they'll tell you some opinions.
Got an 8-year-old.
Oh, there you go.
She's
Oh, interesting.
8-year-old future ballerina, and she's gonna be really cool.
All right.
Yeah, no, she's not in my closet. She's my neighbor.
Commissioner Webb.
Just a point of clarification, I do love the diversity celebration. My question's more on the work plan, since it's gonna be an annual thing, would this take on a permanent spot with the 3?
That's a great
Allotted.
question. Thank you, Commissioner Placone. So ongoing work plan items are allotted their own separate category. And typically those 3 annual items aren't impacted by that at this point in time.
So we can accept all 4 then? Oh,
And the
Okay.
recommendation is to include all 4. in
Right.
the-
sweet. Can I make a motion before?
We should open the floor to public comment first, and I do want to make sure we have all the comments from commissioners. Does anyone on the line have a comment on this item? Seeing none, a motion is in fact now in order.
Sweet. Thank you, Chair. I would like to motion to adopt all 4 items with staff recommendations for our 2024-2025 work plan.
Second.
You know, Joe.
All in favor, raise your hands. It passes quite unanimously. Very exciting work plan. Very exciting. And I really like the timing of how you broke things out, so it's not all happening at once. So thank you for that. Moving along, item 6.3, fiscal year 24-25 meeting schedule. The commission will now receive an oral update on this item from Principal Management Analyst James. The commission will take action on this item.
Thank you, Chair. I only have a brief overview of this item. Historically, the Human Relations Commission has met on the first Thursday of the month from September through June. This schedule for fiscal year 24-25 reflects that for the coming fiscal year with a couple of one exception essentially. In January, Thursday, the 4th
Yep.
is very, very close to the New Year holiday. And often folks are traveling, so I recommend not holding a meeting in that month.
Cool.
The one thing that I also wanted to note was in the fiscal year 23-24 meeting schedule, we had agreed not to hold a meeting on the first Thursday in December because it was the first night of Hanukkah. One of the meetings this year does fall on one of the high holy days for Jewish faith, which is Rosh Hashanah. However, it is the first meeting following the council's approval of the commission's work plan. And to skip that meeting would be to lose out on a month of subcommittee work. So my recommendation, although there is that conflict, is to leave it on the calendar for this fiscal year. With that, I'll open the floor to commissioner questions.
Is it falling on the first night of Rosh Hashanah? Or after sundown of the second night?
I believe that is after sundown of the second. But I would need to check that.
Are there any other commissioner questions or comments? Yes, sir.
I'm interested in asking, I know our meetings are held every Thursday with the exception of the December meeting. Would it be too much to move that meeting to a different day so people don't miss, or whoever celebrates that, doesn't miss it?
Our meeting.
Or yeah, sorry.
No worries. That's a great question, Commissioner Poicone. While the HRC's meetings have been on the first Thursday of the month for, I don't want to say time immemorial, but for many, many years. And folks do plan around them. Because the October meeting, looking at the tentative agenda calendar for now, would mostly consist of the formation of ad hoc committees. And would not likely, unless something comes up, have a substantive agenda item. And because there are multiple modes of participation in the meeting by providing public comment ahead of time, my recommendation would be to keep it on that date, because without moving around other meetings or potentially causing other conflicts, it would be difficult to move that meeting.
Thank you.
Other commissioner questions or comments? I do appreciate the suggestion to move the meeting, but improbable, I guess. With that said, I think there's a motion in order. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the calendar?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, raise hand. And it is unanimous. I'm sorry, I skipped public comment. Is anyone on the line wishing to make public comment on this item? Okay, we circle back. It'd be really interesting if someone jumped in.
Wait. Point of order.
You
Point
can't
of
move your
order.
meetings. You will be there
No.
January 4th.
Oh my God. Excellent. That'd be interesting if that was the one thing someone commented on
They got
today.
that.
Seeing that that wasn't an issue, we are already up to item 7, commission and staff comments, questions, and commission reports. No discussion or action will be taken on any questions raised by the commission at this time. State law prohibits the commission from discussing or acting on substantive non-agenda items. Commissioners, does anyone have anything to say? Is that a hand or a?
I'm just giving them an opportunity to speak. We attended something, didn't we?
We did,
Oh,
but would you like to start?
Okay. You got that first?
He's waved at you.
please, Commissioner Poicone.
Yeah, so Commissioner Webb and I attended a neighborhood meeting out in Solvet, which was beautifully attended. Mayor Showalter, Councilmember Ramirez, and Councilmember Ramos were there in attendance. It was a beautiful opportunity to be able to listen to what the community's concerns are. Most notably tended to be about the unhoused issue, and how there is this concern that they are being transported or even brought to our city from different neighboring cities, and trying to figure out what can be done about it with regard to our city. I think our staff and our council handled it masterfully, which is essentially that we tend to those who are needy, no matter who they are, where they come from. So I definitely would double down on that as well.
Yeah, that was the biggest point of contention there. And I think it was more people were concerned about their neighborhood and how it's looking, and the property value, et cetera, et cetera. I went through the same thing over at, you're going to the meetings for the Crestview Hotel. It was a little disconcerting because people were so selfish. It was all about them. And I get it, but you know, just watching them in action was good for both of us. Unfortunately, they didn't approach us afterwards because we were named at the event. I guess it was a longer meeting as well, because there were lots of questions on this topic. And the
Interesting.
council members were answering them to the best of their abilities. And the analysts that were there did a fantastic job. They came up from multiple rounds of giving their presentations. And there were lots of good questions from, you know, some of the people.
Thank you. I'm so sorry, I missed the neighborhood.
It was,
Sylvan,
Ah, okay.
Grant
Thank you.
Sylvan,
Yeah, the quadrant.
yeah.
Commissioner McDonald.
Um, the Montaloma Neighborhood Association had a meeting with Pat as mayor, to be able to talk with us about city concerns and also getting feedback from the Montaloma residents. And several items came up. One of them was the expense of the new building for public safety and why it wasn't necessary at all to have a new building, but rather a remodel of the current building, which is not so terribly old and you know, and there were a number of people who were unhappy about the explanation. Another concern that came up, of course, was the underparked area at Montaloma.
Right.
Because except for one little top lot and a small area that the city has bought that is
Right.
unutilized, that will be for a dog park, but it's about the same size as my house lot, 5,600 square feet, which is, you know,
Pretty
not
small park.
exactly a big park. Even for dogs. And let's see, there was a third concern that I can't think of it right now. But those were the two biggest ones. And the question came up as to what the actual report was about military equipment being accepted or purchased or whatever by our Mountain View Police Department. And nobody was very clear about whether the report said yes, the PD, the Mountain View Police Department had acquired military equipment or hadn't acquired military equipment. It was kind of an offhand report and nothing that we saw in writing, that anybody saw in writing that clarified what that was. So those were the concerns that were raised.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's really great that we're attending these meetings, sharing back.
Back to the emergency building, because I've been in there a few times. I'm a certified personnel for emergency situations. As much as I won't stick my nose in budgets and all that jazz that don't fully apply, I would just like to say that it is kind of concerning that we have it all hubbed in that one building. We have it all hubbed in that one building, and we're in an earthquake state. And all of our radio systems are in there. Even though we have our fire stations spread around and all that jazz, their entire access abilities are right there. And if it's not up to earthquake standards and we're in an earthquake state, I think it should be more addressed in that regard or explained in that regard, that it is,
Explain that
you
way,
know,
right?
Mhm.
it is an earthquake, it's in an earthquake state and it's an earthquake danger. And it is our emergency earthquake resource. Yeah, just saying that's.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that was a concern that was raised, and essentially it was the same thing. The administration building is not the building where the first responders come from, and they, especially the fire department, needs to be Field Act compliant for earthquakes and other kinds of disasters. But why do we worry about the administration building, which is not where the first
Their radio hub
responders
is in there.
are?
Mm-hmm.
Their radio hub is in there and their communications hub is in there.
Well, that's, it's interesting that you had that information. Nobody, including the mayor, had that information for us.
Everyone should get certified. You'll know what to do in case of emergency.
We would be a better community if that was the case.
It's really boring.
Moving
Bob is fun. Bob is
I
fun.
will talk with the mayor.
Moving along, I just wanted to quickly acknowledge that last month was Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And this month is, of course, Pride Month. And I wanted to also say, this is the end of our fiscal year. I just wanted to acknowledge the amazing and hard work we've all done this year, the progress we've made, the projects we've done, the fun we've had, the long meetings. Well, not so bad, really. We're a efficient bunch.
Don't worry. And
Um,
also watch out for an email of, storytelling that you'll fill
Oh,
out.
yes, the work
right?
is
You'll
the-
fill out, you'll fill
the
out.
work is still
Fill out.
ahead.
You'll submit, yes, submit, yeah.
So I just wanted to take that moment to acknowledge, I think it's been quite a grand year. Thanks, staff, Michael and Laurel for
Mhm.
all their kind effort and great support, keeping us organized. You really deserve a medal for that.
Mhm.
So thank you all. It's been an amazing time. Commissioner Poicon.
Yes, sorry, just wanted to add one more thing. So
course.
I guess recently graduated leadership Mountain View. Thank you so much.
Sorry.
But part of our class project, or my group's project, was creating awareness of some of the community-based organizations that we have here in
Oh, neat.
Mountain View. And the one that we really want to highlight is the Day Worker Center.
Oh,
So
cool.
wanted to invite y'all on Sunday, June 30th, from 2 to 4, and I'll be sending out this flyer
Oh, thank you.
via Laurel as well. We're hosting an open house, co-sponsored with LNV as well as the city of Mountain View.
Neat.
So hope to see y'all there. Y'all can learn what the Day Worker Center is currently doing, how y'all can help. More stuff.
Awesome, great project.
That's
Keep me invite.
Are they
Yeah.
providing food?
Snacks.
How are you gonna get him there?
I've been.
Honestly, snacks brings everyone to the club, so.
No,
Snacks make a party.
It's a great place. I
But-
think there's a lot
yeah.
of good in the community.
And that's it for me, and since we won't be in session, congratulations, Laura, whenever you have your baby. So.
Oh, yes.
Now it's on public record.
Yeah,
You-
no, it's not public.
Are you cleared out? What's
I'm
happening?
still not.
I'm sorry.
And yes, we can't forget. Good luck, congratulations, all of that stuff. So you will, I guess that is a question to staff. You will not be joining us in September when we readjourn.
I will follow up with the commissioners with any news of whether or not I will be
Great.
present at the next meeting, and if not, who will be with you at that time.
Thank you. If you're not here, we will miss you, but we certainly wish you all the best.
Mhm.
And now I believe staff has some comments.
I do
For
briefly,
us.
thank you, Chair. I do want to remind the commissioners that on the fiscal year 23-24, and now on the recommended 24-25 work plan is attendance at CNC meetings, as Commissioners Webb and Poicone reported on recently. The next CNC meeting, Council Neighborhood Committee, is on Thursday, June 13th. And it's for the San Antonio area. It will be held at the Mountain View Community Center in the Redwood Hall, a familiar location. If you would like to be announced to that meeting, please let me know that you are attending ahead of time so that I can provide your names to staff. Additionally, soon after we reconvene in September, there will be the next CNC meeting on Wednesday, September 18th. This will be in the Montaloma, Farley, Rock Street area. And the tentative but unconfirmed location is Montaloma Elementary School. So I'll keep you apprised of where that final location will be. So once again, you may attend. And also with this meeting, please let staff know if you are attending so that we can make the CNC staff aware so you can be announced if you'd like to be. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank
The
you.
date for the Montaloma is what,
Pardon me, Wednesday, September 18th.
September 18th.
Yes.
And coming right around the corner, San Antonio, next Thursday. Thursday? The day before my birthday. There, I just outed myself, sorry. So a little bit of. I don't think so. I mean, sure, but we
And
bring the party.
Montaloma Ice cream social is August 25th.
I'll
Ooh,
write that one down.
yeah, Miss Ice Cream Day.
Yeah, I'm down for that one.
Ice cream socials are another great way to connect with your neighbors about issues that matter to them unless they're eating too much ice cream and they get a sugar high.
What date is that, John?
25th, August.
Time?
Oh, 3 to 5.
Nice, later in the day, a little cooler.
You have a set location?
Oh. Well,
We'll get it.
there are many an ice cream social coming up. I don't think the city keeps a central website of that, but
It should.
if anyone's curious, I
But the
think I have a
candidates for
reasonable,
council do.
there's a reasonably good list that's circulating around. There's one this weekend. I think it's Rex Banner, but
Oh,
ice cream everywhere. With all of that said, item 8, adjournment. We adjourn to the next regular meeting of the Human Relations Commission scheduled for September 5th, 2024, 6:30 PM at the Plaza Conference Room, Mountain View City Hall, and also virtually on Zoom. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, person online.